And salespeople, we're the tip of the spear. We're the ones that are hearing from the market what's going on. And so any change that happens within an organization has an impact on our customers and on our market and our market presence. But as we've talked about, Mark, sales are a lagging indicator, right? Pipeline is even a lagging indicator of the activities that are going on in the marketplace. Where I see the most leaders fall down during change is when they just don't communicate at all. They just think that, oh, if I don't say anything, it'll just keep doing what it's doing right now. And then when there's a change, I'll talk about it. I think it's just super important to make sure that you're talking about it all the time.
Welcome to Building Your Sales Engine. I'm your host, Mark McGraw. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. This is Mark McGraw, and you are listening to Building Your Sales Engine. So today I sit down with Heather Martin, and you talk about somebody who has built their career around being a change agent. This is her. I mean, she is phenomenal at navigating new and wonderful changes that occur. Some wonderful, let's be honest, sometimes in business, they're not so wonderful. And she's done a great job of navigating those rough seas that can occur and getting out on the other side. And she breaks down for us, whether you're a sales individual or a salesperson or an individual contributor or you're a sales leader. Man, it's a great breakdown of making sure that you've got your head on straight, how to do it, make sure that you got data and numbers to back up your feelings and facts. She does a great job of laying this out. So let's dive into that episode. And as always, if you want to get more information from us, please reach out to us. Please do subscribe and follow the podcast. It helps us out tremendously. And all of our handouts and giveaways are at buildingyoursalesengine.com/giveaway. And you can go find them over there. Let's dive in with Heather. Hey everybody, Mark McGraw here. I am here with Heather Martin. I would consider you not only a client, but also a friend. I hope you will accept that role. But welcome to Building Your Sales Engine, Heather. So glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited about the topic.
Oh, me too. Me too. This is a great topic. And you selected this as something for us to spend time on. And the topic that we're going to work on together today is change, managing up, managing ourselves, managing others. And whether, a listener is a sales leader or whether they're an individual, I'm guessing there's a lot of good things. You yourself even describe yourself as a change agent, a change manager. It's kind of been your MO in your career and your profile. Why don't we start there? Tell us a little bit about yourself so everybody has an idea of your background experience and what you've done with respect to change.
Yeah, absolutely. So I say change agent. I have it on my LinkedIn profile. But it's not something I selected. It's really sort of something that selected me. And as I think about my career and where I've been, I had an opportunity really early in my career to move into management fairly quickly. I started leading a team, leading an inside sales team. And as I did that, I started being given opportunities. We were launching new products. We were moving into new markets. We were approaching new channels. And as I did that, I had to start learning and building the skills around how do I help manage my team and the folks around me as we move through this change. And salespeople, we're the tip of the spear. We're the ones that are hearing from the market what's going on. And so any change that happens within an organization has an impact on our customers and on our market and our market presence. And I had to learn very early how to listen to the market and how to share that back internally in a way that people could hear it, could understand it, and could react to it. And then as I grew in my career, I was in IT for quite some time in lots of different roles. We were acquired. That wasn't necessarily the cleanest acquisition. So, we were bringing that organization together. We were launching new products. I went and worked for a handful of startups. Those startups, you're growing, you're being acquired, you're acquiring companies, you're reducing staff. There are lots of different changes. And I feel like it feels like every 6 to 12 months, there's some very significant change in my career that has impacted my team and those around me. And so I've had to learn over time, how do I manage that change? How do I share what we're hearing in the marketplace? How do I make sure my team stays focused? Because as revenue leaders, our job is to deliver against revenue, but we're impacted by everything that's happening around us.
And you just rattled off at just a laundry list of different things that create change. for us as salespeople or sales leaders, whether it's an acquisition, a RIF, a reduction in force, whether it's a new market that's going on. The other one that I hear a lot is, "Hey, we're industry focused, and then we're going to be product focused, or we're going to be we're product focused, and then we're going to be industry focused." And people get new territory assignments. Mm-hmm. They get new bosses. There's almost an endless list of change that happens, and your background largely is startups, but I see the same thing on the enterprise side of the world as well. So there's no end to the amount of change that we face day in and day out. But the question is how do we manage it? So let's start there. Like, what are some of the things you've gone through this so many times, and your staff even looks at you as an expert in this field, which is awesome. I look at you as an expert in this field. What are some of the things that you find are so foundational about managing change?
Yeah, I think, I've had the blessing of working for really, really great leaders over time. And one of the things that I learned early on and then continue to bring through is you have to measure your business. You have to know your business, right? It's very easy for anyone within an organization to say, oh, sales are down. But as we've talked about, Mark, sales are a lagging indicator, right? Pipeline is even a lagging indicator of the activities that are going on in the marketplace. And so foundationally, anytime I start a new role, anytime I'm thinking about a change, I'm making sure I have all of the KPIs in that funnel that lead ultimately to revenue being measured. Activities, meetings, events, leads, what we're getting from marketing, the number of meetings we're having that are or are not generating opportunities. How many calls is it taking to get to an opportunity? This funnel of metrics is how you lay the foundation to be able to have those internal conversations when changes happen later, because then you can pinpoint where in this funnel is something going wrong. And by the way, that's a foundation that I didn't start because of change. It's a foundation I started because of coaching team members, right? You need to manage every single team member's funnel so that you know, oh, well, this particular person is really good at closing revenue, but they're not good at getting from the meeting to the opportunity. Well, then that's where you know how to coach. The same thing is true for your business going through change. If I see a metric that's lagging or that has changed alongside whatever just took place, then now I know where I can go pinpoint, oh, this isn't quite working with this new market or this move up market or this transition in a territory. So what do I have to do to fix that? So that's one of the pieces, is knowing your business and managing your business. But then there's the operational rhythm around how are you interacting with your team? How are you interacting with your peers? And how are you managing up to make sure that everyone understands what's going on with the business so that those metrics can be communicated?
I love the outline you just gave with the pipeline and the fact that sales is a lagging indicator, and that really even pipeline is a lagging indicator to activities. That's great. That's although that's adjunct to change, that's a super important concept for people to have in their heads. And I applaud you, and I appreciate the fact that you've got those numbers so dialed in. So when you're looking at those numbers and you're coaching someone about change or about an area where they need help in, if you're working with a team member, how are you managing them? How are you managing your mindset through all of these? Let's talk about some of those things.
Yeah, as we're working through change, I think within your team, you need to be a safe place for people to come, right? I think you said on the cross-sell podcast, Mark, that salespeople are intuitive. They can figure out when things are going on, but that also means that salespeople are hearing from the market things that haven't made it into the data yet. They haven't made it back to your product team. They haven't made it back to your executive team or your marketing team. And so you as a leader have to be able to listen to the threads that your team is bringing you, those frustrations, right? Because that's usually the way that those start. It's, man, I feel like every call I get on, we go through the pitch deck and it just doesn't land. The message just isn't landing. They might not be able to articulate that it's product market fit or message fit or that you're missing an ROI slide, but they can articulate that it's just not doing what it should do, right? So you take that. You have to be safe. You have to be a place where they're willing to come back and say, I can just know I can vent to you. But if you start hearing it and you start pulling those threads together, then you can go back at your metrics and you can say, okay, well, is it just that person or is it multiple people that are seeing this? And the way that I would diagnose that particular example is, okay, when I get a discovery meeting and I do that pitch, what's my conversion rate to opportunities? And is it, as I'm managing through change, is it better or worse than it was last year? And if it's worse, then you get to start having a conversation around, okay, maybe this messaging isn't working either to the market or to the new territory that I'm trying to sell into, or the new product, right? And so then you have to go back and you have to diagnose what's going on here. There's so many tools at our disposal nowadays. All of our calls are recorded, right? I can go back and I can actually listen to those calls. I can find the ones that convert and the ones that don't and see what the difference is, and then try to fix it from there.
Yeah, so a key point there is that even before, at least what I hear in that, is that even before you're introducing change, you have to have an environment where people feel safe. Sometimes in Sandler and the management side of things, we'll talk about the fact that somebody has to have, as a manager, you have to have permission with your people to speak honestly, protection so that they're in a safe space, and potency, meaning that you've got enough competence to be able to do what you're doing. So what I hear in there is really that protection. You're protecting them such that they can share with you what's really going on and what they're hearing in the marketplace. It's almost like if you wait too long to have that, if you're in the midst of change and then you're trying to build up that culture, that's a train wreck. That's not going to work well.
Yeah, I mean, psychological safety, right? But there's a lot of material out there about how do you set it up and how do you do it. But I had a team member of mine say, "Man, sometimes you just know when you have to listen and not talk." They said, you were my first call when this happened because I just needed someone to vent to. I needed to yell and be angry about it. And then we could figure out how do we move forward. But you have to be able to be that safe space that someone can come back and say, man, this isn't working. We can't do this way anymore. And they can yell and they can get it all out without you reacting, without you, forwarding that Slack message to someone who caused the problem, because that person that's not the message that is going to correct that situation. It's not the coaching that someone else needs, but it is what your team needs to get off their back. And if you can set that up before the change, then when the change happens, you're going to catch all those threads, but you're also going to hear the real frustrations. And you're going to know how to, I think there was, I was listening to something the other day. It might've been your podcast, Mark, but it was, I think it was with coaching. It was, if you see it once, it's probably happening 10 times. Right. Yeah. I think you were talking about performance coaching. And I think that's true for any negative feeling that's out there or any negative thing that's out there. Right. If one person says once really angrily, this happened and we can't have it keep happening, it probably happened 10 other times.
Yeah.
And so you have to listen to it, but you have to be that person that they can come to in those moments of emotion and feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, that's a concept I came up with a few years ago. The 10x10 is 100. That in the first 10, I won't go through the whole thing, but the first 10 is that when you see a problem, you're usually seeing 10% of the real problem. It's a lot deeper. So to your point, if a pitch isn't landing and you're starting to hear that frustration, it's probably happening a lot more often than that one instance, and therefore something might need to change about the message or the mode or whatever it is that takes place.
And once you have that hypothesis, it's that KPI measurement foundation that allows you to then communicate that internally, right? Yeah. Because I was talking to someone the other day and they said, I had a gut feeling, but no data. Well, as salespeople, we get a lot of gut feelings, but that's not how all of the other functions that we partner with function, right? And you're talking to engineering, you're talking to product, you need to bring data. I have a whole family of engineers, so this is probably an area that I know more than I would even like to, but you have to bring data back to it. It can't just be, I feel like this is the case. And I had a chief of staff who coached me at one point, and they said, you raise issues and you're right, but you can't raise them until you have the data to back it up. That doesn't mean you have to wait 3 weeks. It just means you have to have that foundation in place so that you can come back and you can document what the problem is. And so I've been doing a lot more of that in the latter half of my career, where when I have a hypothesis, I will document the hypothesis. I'll document what happened to make me think that. And then I go look for in that data, what is backing this up so that you can then dig into that root cause.
And then ultimately, are you then using that to paint a story or to tell a story as to why we need to change something? Or is that what's taking place there? Is that part of the story building? It's the data that backs up the emotion?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. It's the data that backs up the emotion. And then it's and then it's a decision on, can I fix this myself? Or do I have to go get help internally or externally in order to fix it, right? And so having, the other piece of the foundation is having those cross-functional relationships within your organization, up, down, and around, so that you're also hearing from those folks. What are they hearing? What's happening in their world? And how do you pull those together to build that story? So sometimes, for instance, often in my roles, I am in a new business role, and I might have a counterpart in account management. And a lot of the issues that I would see, or a lot of the change that happens, are impacting both of us. So I might come up with a hypothesis and find that data, and then I'll present that to my peer, and I'll say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? And then I add more to that story. And then I go, okay, maybe this is a bigger challenge than I thought it was. And how do we go change that? But why this is so important when you're managing through those big changes is that we talked about it, but it's really easy for someone to say, oh, revenue's not there. Either the team's not working, the leader's not working, the change isn't working, right? And if you have that data and you can tell that story, and you can come back internally and say, actually, I think it will work if we fix this, because the company made a strategic decision to go in this direction. So now you're just supporting, how do I improve this direction we're heading in?
And then, okay, so then at some point we come to the fact that we have to communicate up, down, over, sideways. And you've I tell you what, I've circled the word listen and hear, those two words probably 3 times even in my notes already. So that's absolutely a critical part of the foundation of having the trust and listening and hearing. So when it comes time to communicate a change, I mean, should we dive over there for a minute? And
yeah.
I know we got to manage it internally, we got to manage it externally. So how do we go about doing that? What are some of the best practices you've found there?
Yeah. I'll start with managing up, because we've talked a lot about this. So I think we can kind of cover off on that. But when you communicate up, gut feelings don't cut it. So support it with data, build that story, write it down. Because when you write it down, then you can socialize it widely. People can ask questions about it, and we can start poking holes. So that's the first thing. And then I'm going to come back to a risk register later. So this is just me reminding you that when you're communicating, you should always include your risk register, but we'll talk about that when we talk about managing yourself. First of all, we're all super intuitive. We know when a change is coming. We know when a change is happening, right? A lot of sales teams are very motivated on, let me go close deals. They know what success looks like, and it's easy for them to define success, but you might have to redefine success for your team for a short period of time, right? If you're pivoting and you've got a 12-month sales cycle, then you're not going to see revenue on this pivot for a year. So how do you define for your team early, again, using that data funnel to say, oh, the success rate here is that we have this many meetings, or we open this much pipeline. And how do you help them see themselves as succeeding, even when perhaps that indicator that they're used to anchoring on maybe is going to be lagging? Listen and hear, for sure, right? Have that open space. Have an operational rhythm with your team that stays consistent. This is a time for you to be more stable than everything else around you, right? If everything around you from a company perspective is changing, then your team meetings have to stay consistent. Your one-on-ones have to stay consistent. Your communication and your values have to stay consistent. If I'm a very transparent leader, almost to a fault. If all of a sudden I stopped being transparent with my team, they'd be like, wait a second, what's happening, right? So all of that has to stay really stable. And then for me, the other big piece is you have to support your team's mental health, and you have to be vulnerable in those moments. So there will be frustrations, right? Your team will come to you and they'll say, man, I'm really frustrated by this. I'm frustrated that our message isn't landing and I'm not creating opportunities. Yeah, so am I. I'm also really frustrated by that. Here's what we're trying to do to fix it, right?
You said that, and I thought to myself, I can't remember the last time either I said that or I heard somebody say that. Just an affirmation that I feel the same way that you do. Yeah. So that's anyway. Sorry to interrupt you, but my gosh,
I think it's super
I had a
important.
moment there.
Yeah, I think it's super important. And then we'll talk next probably about managing yourself, but mental health during changes is so important, right? I'm not going to know all the behavioral or all the details around stress levels and all of that, but we know stress for prolonged periods of time is bad, right? We know that that's true. And you know your team better than anyone. I have been known to look at my team after they've ranted at me for an hour, right? Which again, safe space. I want to be that safe space. And I've said everything you're feeling is really, really valid. You're like everything's you're not making it up. But also I think you need a break. Go take an afternoon off. When was the last time you took vacation?
Wow.
Because there is in America, we tend to not take PTO as much as we should. I had someone who was like, oh, well, I'm out on Friday, but I'll be on email. And I'm like, what? Why? Because you're already feeling a little burnt out. So let's stop doing that. Put me on your out of office. I promise I can handle your territory for a day. It'll be okay. And go take the time, right? So modeling that vulnerability and then calling out to your team when you think they need to go take a break, and in a constructive way, right? Not in a way that invalidates the actual problems or challenges they're going through, but in a way that allows them to take the time that they need, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And, what a great way of looking at it, that when you recognize that someone needs some time off, that you recognize that you're giving them that space, because there's a ton of pressure in what we do. Mm-hmm. And it's self-inflicted, self-induced, and we put it on ourselves. Other people put it on us too. But at the same time, a lot of times our expectations are higher of ourselves than anyone else. And so the whole part about, self-care through that, I think is really a very good point. I want to come back to something that you mentioned a minute ago that I think it's also really important. And that is that when people are going through change, that you're consistent, yes. That you can't change everything. I had a really good friend of mine and client, her name was Arwen Haas, and Arwen studied this as a topic. And I asked her one day, what's the one thing that you would coach someone about change? And she said, when leaders introduce change into an organization, they typically start with what's different. Here's what we're going to go do that's new and different. She said the one thing that we could all do is to start with what's going to stay the same. So, give them a foundation by which they can deal with the change. And I hear that in your description. Hey, our goals are remaining the same by and large. Our meeting structure and rhythm, our morals, our ethics, our values, all that remains the same. But here's some other things that we're going to have to do differently over here. So I hear that loud and clear in your description.
Yeah. And I think, the other part of that is then communicating consistently, right? So now you've laid the groundwork. You've said this is what's going to change, this is what's not going to change. But then making sure that you're communicating early and often. And I wrote down as I was kind of thinking about this, like managing it like a sales cycle, Mark, where if you say you're going to get a customer something by Friday, if you're delayed, you're still sending that email to that customer and saying, hey, I know I owed you this today, but I'm delayed. You have to do the same thing with your team. If you told your team, I'm going to get you, I don't know, an updated comp plan in line with this new go-to-market motion by Thursday, and you don't have the comp plan by Thursday, it might not be something you had any control over, but you have to go back to them and say, hey, I know I told you I was going to get you the comp plan by Thursday. We ran into this hiccup, and now it's going to come out next Thursday, right? And I'll do everything I can to get you there. But where I see the most leaders fall down during change is when they just don't communicate at all. They just think that, if I don't say anything, it'll just keep doing what it's doing right now. And then when there's a change, I'll talk about it. I think it's just super important to make sure that you're talking about it all the time. I had a change, and I opened it up to my team. I said, okay, we have 5 minutes at the end of this call. I started it and I said, hey, I know there's been some changes. We're going to run this call the way we always do. And we did. It was a pipeline review call. So we ran the pipeline review call the way we always did. And we had 7 minutes. And I said, all right, we've got 7 minutes. Open forum to ask whatever questions you want. The only question I got was, what's your favorite color? Which I thought was funny. I laughed. And it's green, by the way. But what I liked about that is, first of all, hopefully that means I'd been communicating well enough to the team, right? That no one was super surprised by the change. But also, we showed consistency, and then we showed, hey, we're gonna make space. We're gonna make space to have a conversation about this. And if we had needed to take things offline, and I think I even said I'll answer anything that I legally can, because that's the other part. And maybe we transition into how you manage yourself through this, but if you're going to be vulnerable and transparent with your team, there are going to be times when you just can't answer or
Yeah.
do the thing they're asking you to do.
And that's
right?
frustrating as a manager. That's
It's
tough.
super frustrating. It's super frustrating. I had one the other day where someone said, why would I include this person in this conversation? And I said, I can't answer that right now. And they said, cool. And they just did it anyway. Right.
Yeah.
But I think you need to acknowledge that sometimes that's the case. You have to build that psychological safety and the trust within your team that they believe that if you could answer that question, you would. Right. And then you have to give yourself the space to say, I can't do this right now. And that comes with prioritization too, right? There will be, when you're listening to your team and they're sharing those frustrations, there will be times where they say, I need this, or can't we fix this problem? And you'll say, that is a very real problem, but that is not a problem that we have bandwidth, time, resources, whatever to address today. And then it goes on your risk register because you're going to have to touch it at some point, right? And then when you're sharing that back up with your leadership team, you're saying, here are all the risks that we just can't deal with right now. But we know they're out there, right? They're the known risks. But giving yourself the grace to ruthlessly prioritize, to set your own boundaries and know what you can and can't get done, to know what you can own versus what one of your cross-functional leaders needs to own. And you just need to be able to delegate it, or not even delegate it, but just allow that person to own their side of the business, right? All of this is part of how you manage yourself through change too. And it's how it allows you to then communicate to your team, because you can say things like, yes, that's really important. We can't do that right now. So we'll talk about it later.
Concept that I keep hearing a lot about right now, and I heard Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank talk about it, and I've heard others too, signal versus noise. Have you heard this? I'm sure you have. No?
No, I not specifically, no.
Yeah, it's the reference was particularly around Elon Musk as somebody that has a goal and an objective, like him or not, put that aside. The guy's accomplished a lot. And he is able to focus on the signal, meaning that's the direction and it's the signal. Okay. Noise is everything else, everything that doesn't pertain to that particular goal. And sometimes they're important things, but you can't deal with them. To your point, you have to set them aside and say that at this moment is important, but it's also noise to the signal that we're trying to drive towards over here. And you have to park those things, it seems like, from time to time, even though that they make a lot of, they're loud sometimes, and they need attention, but they can't need attention now because there's other more important things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And as leaders, we talked offline about leadership being a trait, right? Versus a role. But in this case, as a leader in a role, it's your job to have the wider view, right? And so, yes, your team will bring things to you that are super important to them or their territory or their niche that maybe aren't aligned to the total signal to where the organization is going, right? And so that is one of those areas where you have to say, look, I know this is super important. It's really important for you. It's just not a priority. It's not aligned to the signals that we're trying to meet against right now. Yeah. And if you've built up that psychological trust and you have the trust of your team and you have the potency, hopefully, right, they'll be like, okay, I get it. This is a challenge for me. We'll come back to it, right? Or is there coaching you could get them, or is there something you could do to help them work through it? So the last thing I'll say there in managing yourself is, you've heard the concept of be like a duck, right? Like cool and calm on the surface, but paddling like crazy underneath. That's what it feels like to me when you manage through change, right? I've said a lot about, you need to be stable for your team. You need to keep your operational rhythm. You need to communicate a lot, but that means you have to take care of yourself too. So everything I said about giving breaks to your team and your mental health and all of that goes for you as a leader too. And if you don't model it, your team won't do it. So if you need to have that moment with your leader or with a trusted friend or with a coach or a mentor to vent and get it out, then you should do that, right? And it's okay to be frustrated about the same things. It's okay to be frustrated about the things that you have to deprioritize, but you have to be frustrated about them, sit in that feeling for a bit, and then put it on the risk register and say, we'll get to it later. You need to take a break if you need to take a break. If you work out, don't let those, just because there's a lot going on, don't let those fall to the wayside. That's something that I probably learned later than I should, but I was with an organization where I came out of a meeting and I said, wow, the next 12 months are going to be a lot of change and there's going to be a lot going on for the next 12 months. And instead of anything else, what I did first was I signed up to work with a personal trainer. And I said, I'm just going to prioritize this because it's something that I can control and it's something that's going to help me be a better leader as I move through this. And putting money where my mouth was is how I made sure I stayed consistent with it. But, I think it's important that if you're going to get your team to do that, you need to model it yourself.
Yeah.
And you need to make it important.
And what can happen, at least that I've seen, and I've been guilty of this too, and that is it starts to show on your face as a leader. Meaning that if you're stressed and you're panicked, I've often had this image in my head of a captain at the wheel of a ship in the middle of a storm. And if the captain is panicked, and if the captain is sending off, he doesn't have this under control, crew's not going to be in a good headspace. And so I think about that as a metaphor, an analogy, whatever it is, right? That we need to make sure that we are in our heart calm, cool, and collected. But if we're not, we need to at least on our face come across, because people read into that stuff. I don't know how many times, probably happened to you, where somebody will look at me, I come in, I got my game face on, and they're like, "Everything okay?" I'm like, "No, I'm dialed in." But we're sending messages to people constantly, and sometimes it's not the right message, especially when there's a lot of pressure and a lot of things going on. So that self-management's so important.
Yeah, it really
100% with you there.
Yeah, it really is, because it just exacerbates the issue, right? If you are stressed, you are that duck and you're paddling underneath, but you've let that stress level impact other parts of your life, right? You're not getting the time you need, you're not getting the downtime, you're not setting those boundaries. Then you're right. Everybody else notices, and then they assume you're not telling them something, right? They assume there's something else going on because maybe they feel fine about the changes, but all of a sudden you look like, it's blue skies, but you look nervous, like there's a storm coming. They're going to see right through that, right? So I think it's all the same conversation. Make sure you're communicating what you can communicate. Make sure you are under control enough that you're not communicating something you don't mean to communicate. Right.
Yeah, and it seems like in the absence of information for salespeople or anybody in an organization, they fill in the blank with the worst case scenario, don't they? Yes,
exactly. Yeah, and I think that's why communicating early and often, even if it's I don't have it, I thought I was going to, but I don't.
Yeah.
Here's why is even better, right? If you can share that. But sharing as much as you possibly can as early as you can, and saying I don't know if you don't know. Right. Because I think that's really important too, is if someone asks you a hard question and you honestly don't know the answer, don't dance around it. Just say, I don't know. Or say, I can't answer that question right now. Right. But find a way that you can be transparent and truthful while still trying to keep everybody on the focus. Right.
It is funny to me, Heather, that when our people look at us, sometimes, not always, they look at us and they think that we're supposed to have all the answers. And the fact is, we're human too. We don't have all the answers. We don't know exactly we have to make our best educated guess on things. But anyway, sometimes people look at us like we've got all the answers. Honestly, a lot of times we don't. We're trying to figure it out like everybody else, but yet we're in a leadership position. So different circumstance.
Give yourself permission to not have all the answers, right? I think that's so important, no matter where you are in the organization, right? Whether you're an individual contributor, you're leading a small team, you're in the executive team, give yourself permission to not have the answers. And if it's something you can go figure out together, then do. I've had my team, I've said, that's a really good question. I don't have an answer for you. Could you document that for me and send it to me so that I can then share it up, right? So how do you turn some of those managing up use cases to do that? And I had another one, I had someone who came to me once and said, they were like, wow, I just feel like I'm not selling well. Like, I feel like there's something going wrong. And they said, is it me? Is it something that I'm doing? Am I not a good seller? And I'd been on enough calls with this person that I knew it wasn't that. Right. I knew coaching opportunities always exist, but it wasn't that they just are a terrible seller. And so I pulled up some of that data and I looked and I put a couple of filters in and I looked at the close percentage And that person's close percentage plummeted when this particular requirement was on the table.
Hmm.
And I said, well, there's a signal for you, right?
Hmm.
So how do we go solve that problem? And I feel like I'm bringing us full circle, but that was really important because had I not listened to that person, had I not known enough about them, and had they not been safe enough to say, hey, I feel like I'm failing, had I not known enough about that person to say, ooh, I don't think that's the problem, had I not been managing the business so that I could very quickly on the phone with them say, what is the problem here and what is it looking like? I wouldn't have found that, oh, maybe there is a messaging or product or fit issue here, right? And now I can take that and say, okay, what is this? And it at the time it opened up a can of worms that allowed me to just kind of go down this path and say, okay, how do we change this part of the business? And I think that's just to bring us full circle. Like that's what's important about all these different pieces and having the foundation in place to move through this so that you can very quickly take that question from your team, take that thread that you hear, come up with a hypothesis, diagnose what the situation is, and then try to figure out how do I go solve it, whether it's yourself or with your partner or with your business partners or if it's with your team. But there's a lot of hypotheses out there. Being able to very quickly look at what is this hypothesis? Is it true? And what do we think the root cause is super important.
And when I visualize when I hear you speak about that of managing out, not just yourself in the center, although that's part of it, but managing it out, meaning that you've got to manage up, you got to manage sideways to your peers, and you've got to manage down to your people, and really being the master and commander of that moment. That's really truly a gift, and it's also a skill I think that you've learned and you've unpacked with us over some time, and made that much clearer in terms of how do you go do it. And it is a great full circle moment for all of the things that you've talked about, including hearing and listening and trusted relationships. One thing that you mentioned earlier, I cannot let this go. I'm dying to know about what a risk register is.
Oh,
let's
yes.
come back to that. Let's come back to that, and we can wrap up together.
Yeah. So as I think about, and I'll put it in the context of change, right? But there are things that we hear all the time that we know are risks to the business that we may or may not be able to do anything about in that particular moment, right? But it's important that you don't lose those risks. It's important that you don't, just because you say this is important but not critical, and it's not urgent, so I can't deal with it right now. You can't just not put it anywhere. Because it'll come back, it'll keep you up in the middle of the night, but also eventually that could become a critical and urgent issue, right? And so especially when you're going through change, or whether you're planning for change or you're in the thick of it or you're coming out of it, having a risk register where you keep those risks when they come up, right? So if your team member comes to you and says, I think this is going to be a problem, and you look at that and you go, yeah, that does seem like it's going to be a problem. It is not a problem that we can solve right now. It goes on the risk register. And it might stay at the bottom of that risk register for a year. It might become really urgent 2 weeks from now. But when you're managing up, when you're doing that documentation, when you're looking at your hypotheses, you have this list of things that you've already identified that could be problems, could be issues, are issues, you just can't get to them yet. And if you always keep that front and center, then everyone knows what you've chosen to deprioritize, or what you've all agreed to deprioritize, right? I was on a call once where we said, hey, I think this is going to be a problem. I think that the first time we sell this, we're going to have to figure it out together. And everyone said, yes, that is true. And we said, how long are our sales cycles? He said, it's this many months. And they said, cool. So the earliest that's going to be a problem is like 3 months from now. And we all agreed, yes, that's true. We probably want to think about it before then. And we said, cool, let's put it on the risk register. And we will revisit this in about 4 weeks, right? Because yes, it's going to be a problem. Yes, we have to work through it, but there's other things that are a higher priority right now. And so that's the concept of risk register. And if you keep that connected to all the documentation and all the managing up that you do, and you listen to your team when you tell them their problems and they go on the risk register so they feel heard, then you're not losing anything. You're keeping all that feedback, and you're acknowledging what risks you're choosing to just let sit there. And that you've all agreed to do it. It's not that someone missed it. It's not that it was a hole in in capability. It was just hey, we can't deal with this right now, so we're gonna worry about it.
Today it's noise, it's not
Yes.
signal, but in 90 days from now, it's
Yes.
going to be signal.
Yes, exactly.
It's going to be the constraint that you're going to have to deal with, and that's awesome. It's almost like a parking lot for potential issues that you have. And I love the fact it sounds like you're not only documenting those, you're keeping them up in front. And it sounds like to me that you're also sharing that with managing up, which is a big issue for a lot of people as well. So if you keep that list in front of them and say, hey, we've recognized these things could be issues. We need to have these aware, can't do anything about them right now, but we need to be cognizant that these are things that could come up.
Exactly.
Heather, last question for you. We wrap up. If let's say you're an employee, let's say you're a salesperson, what kinds of things should they be thinking about with respect to change? Because there's a lot of things outside of their control that they really can't do much with. Is there any one piece of advice that you might give to somebody who is a seller and they're in the midst of all of this storm of change?
Gosh, I'll answer it two ways. The first one is a lot of what I just talked about, you can do as a leader, but you can also do as a salesperson, right? If you know your business, if you know your metrics, if you can see, normally I have a 35% close rate and it just plummeted to 20, right? I feel like I'm losing deals more often. Maybe rather than going straight to my boss and saying, I feel like I'm losing deals more often, fix it. You can look at the data and say, oh, sure am, right? And then you can manage up the same way I did, which is document it. I am not the best at documentation. I believe in its importance, and it is a skill that I'm always trying to get better at. But I like to use SCQA, situation, complication, question, answer, right? Here's the situation. I feel like my close rate is plummeting. My complication is that we just changed the product that I'm selling, and now I don't feel like I have all the information on it. The question is, how do I get up to speed on this? Who should I be working with? You can do it in a lot of different ways, but I like the structure because it's very easy to just answer those questions. And then you can bring that to your leader and say, here's what I need from you in order to be more successful during this change. But the other part of it is, I think having those really honest conversations with your leader and being willing through the change to not have your success only tied to the paycheck, right? Acknowledging that you're part of something that's a little bit bigger that's happening in this moment, this pivot, this change, this launch, this acquisition, this sale. And if you can tie, so many salespeople tie their self-worth only to what did I close this month, right? And that's for a lot of different reasons that we don't have to go into on this call. But if you can tie your self-worth to something else, whether it's the team or helping the team or the company's vision or what your leader is saying, hey, this is what we're going to go set out to do. We're going to set out to have this many meetings on this topic instead of setting out to just close revenue in the next 2 months. I think that helps you as a salesperson get through some of that change and see the leading indicators of success before those lagging indicators catch up.
It's great advice. And so it's keep your numbers, document what you've got going on. And, the expression, what you focus on grows. If you focus on the fear of change and the uncertainty, that's what you're going to get. If you focus on other people and helping them through it and be a light in the storm, you're going to be that. So,
the last thing I'll say there is that be positive. Like, be positive with the people on your team and all of that. But have that person, if it's your leader, that's great. But have that person that you can have a venting session with, right? Get it out, get the negative stuff out, and then recommit, right? Recommit to the vision and the goal and move in that direction.
That's great. Great advice. Great conversation with you, Heather. I'm so glad we unpacked all of this. I got pages of notes sitting over here and tons of good stuff, and I know our listeners have as well. So can't thank you enough. By the way, we should come back and talk about pipeline and deal management too. That'd be fun too.
We absolutely should. That would be outstanding.
Phenomenal at that you are. So again, thank you so much, Heather. So glad you took the time, and I know our listeners do as well.
Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome.